has changed the world, giving us instant access to information. And to talk more about the plans that the internet giant has and how technology is really influencing our lives, Nikesh Arora, Chief Business Officer of Google, and clearly one of the most highly placed global Indians. Nikesh, thanks so much for talking to us on NDTV.
My pleasure, Shweta. Nice to see you again.
We're bang in the midst of election season, and the big worry really for politicians is the impact that technology or the online world can have on influencing the outcome of elections. Do you think politicians in India right now are underestimating the power of the internet?
Oh, I've never known politicians to underestimate anything. But having said that, I think, to be honest, technology has been extremely helpful around the world as far as it has come to election processes, because it's the most expedient way of making sure information gets out to everybody. It's the most expedient way for people to communicate back and forth with their potential sort of leaders that come out of the election process. So, and all around, technology has been extremely helpful in getting people more and more involved, more and more engaged in the democratic process. This sort of advent of technology, the ability to stay in touch with your citizens, allows you to go back and constantly poll them and allow you to get an understanding of what they think about different issues as they arise and when they arise. So I think there is an efficiency argument to technology in creating more scale to engage with citizens. So I think from that perspective, it's useful.
Does it go beyond simple efficiency? For instance, can a company like Google influence the outcome of elections, or at least, the way certain candidates are being viewed, for instance, by simply pushing up certain search results? Now, that's the big concern.
Well, to be fair, I don't think, we don't do anything in terms of pushing up results. As you understand, it is an algorithm which is based on user preferences and the way users interact, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into what determines what ends up at the top of a search result. By that logic, we could, by that allegation, we could be doing a lot of other things, but we choose not to because it's A, it's not the right thing to do. B, our whole premise is that it is based on technology, based on user behavior, the wisdom of crowds. And
so you do not influence it at all?
We have no means of influencing any result.
So if a particular politician is, and the number of search results, or if you say so-and-so is the most searched politician in India, you're saying as Google, you have no influence on the number of search results that come in, and you will not influence it, and you cannot influence it.
There is no way I can influence how many people search for something.
Or somebody.
On any search term. Something, somebody, any product, we can't influence how many people search. That's like saying how many people wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't know. I can't influence it.
But you can push up certain search results, and that's part of your revenue generation strategy.
We don't push up individual results. What happens is there are algorithms that run, and the algorithms determine based on what is popular, what makes sense, what the quality signals are, what the most likely answer is going to be. But we don't individually choose any particular thing that allows us to move one thing versus the other.
All right, there are concerns, Nikesh, really on the growing dominance of internet giants like Google, whether it is in the online world or even offline. Concerns particularly in India about the kind of activities that Google is funding, whether it is research for think tanks or even influencing the governance of internet in India, whether it is in terms of policy making or other activities. Are those concerns and fears really legitimate?
I don't know where those concerns come from, but I think you need to understand it. From our perspective, we have a series of products that users like. We're one click away from competition. Users can tomorrow decide they don't want to use Google if you don't do the right thing by the user. So that's the most fundamental thing to understand. From the way, not only are we platforms of technology, whether it's for elections or anything else, at the same time, we are we could be victims of the same technology if we don't do the right thing by the user. Right. Users can choose tomorrow to go do something else at some other company, some other engine, if we are not doing the right thing by them. So that is a very important thing to understand. We have no incentive to spoil that relationship with our users.
Right.
In terms of your notion of us attempting to influence anything, look, we have never tried to influence outcomes in the wrong way for the users. We're a business, like every other business. We have a point of view. Our point of view is that the internet should be open. Our point of view is that we should think about things from a user-first perspective. Our point of view is that we should do things which are perfectly above board and legal in every country that we operate in. all we try and make sure is that we fund research which makes sense. We fund individuals who are trying to do the right thing. I don't think we actively go out there and try and figure out what can we influence out there. We're funding good ideas from great people.
But the entire privacy debate, especially with a stunning admission coming from Google, saying that the 425 million Gmail users should know that they should not expect any privacy when they're actually exchanging information on the email service. Now, that's pretty worrisome for users like me. Now, when I'm exchanging an email using Gmail, which there are 425 million users, should I not be entitled to a certain amount of privacy?
Of course you're entitled to privacy. I'm not sure we got the notion from that your privacy is anyway being compromised while you're exchanging messages with anybody. I think that's a notion that you should rid yourself of very, very quickly, because it's simply not true. Nobody at Google is looking at your emails and infringing your privacy. There are algorithms that run to make sure that there is no spam getting into your inbox. There are algorithms that run to make sure we provide you advertising that makes sense for you. If you're looking at data in aggregate, trying to understand what makes sense, then we think it's perfectly reasonable to do it on an aggregate basis to try and make sure that you provide things to people that are more relevant. I think the discussion on privacy, it's important to understand that as this technology becomes pervasive, there are choices we're going to make as users where we decide to share a certain amount of information so that things become more and more useful to us. We've been using credit cards for many years. It's perfectly fair to expect that the credit card company has all your information about what you bought, where you bought, and when you bought it.
Right.
But we choose to share that information because it makes it convenient for us to not have to carry large amounts of cash in our wallet. So we decide we're willing to share our information with somebody who will have access to some of our information because I traded for convenience. I think over time we're going to trade information of ourselves the full cognizance, which allows us to make our lives more convenient and more useful.
But convenience doesn't justify invasion of privacy, Nikesh. That remains the larger issue. So you're saying that just because it's convenient to use an email service, it's all right if your privacy is being invaded?
I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I do not condone the notion of invading anybody's privacy.
Right.
Nor do I, nor does Google. We hold our users' data in very high regard. There are many instances where we have been petitioned, requisitioned, instructed by governments around the world to try and hand over user data, which we have chosen not to do, and dealt with the consequences.
Right,
so
but
it doesn't matter what you say.
It was a filing made in a US district court by Google saying that there is a reasonable expectation that by users of Gmail that yes, the data is being screened.
I don't think the words of data is being screened.
Okay, I could be wrong in the exact usage of words,
but
yeah.
There are algorithms that run against our servers across data, which are there to prevent spam from entering into people's mailboxes. There are algorithms that run making sure there is no irregular activity, that nobody's hacking your information.
Right.
We run all kinds of algorithms against large amounts of data to ensure we're able to provide great service.
Right. And that brings me to the point of your dealings with governments, and it's something that you brought up as well, where you're saying that you actually get a lot of flack where governments expect you to share certain data, but you choose not to. On the contrary, we're seeing internet companies like Google, in fact, in the midst of the entire controversy, the most recent one being of US authorities actually spying on digital information of top world leaders, where you're also part of the entire probe. Now, how do you deal with situations like these? Because that raises larger issues that have in fact led to serious diplomatic issues between countries.
I understand that. I think in this case, this is a broader challenge that every one of us is facing, and I think part of it, what we have actually been on the side of the user. We've tried to make sure that none of our systems are compromised. We have, I think all of us have been caught unawares in this process.
So you're saying you've been caught unawares in this process, and you are, for instance, the Brazil government particularly asking you to ensure that you store your data locally. Now, is that something that Google would agree to do?
Look, I think these are conversations that we're having with governments, and we should let these conversations happen in private between us and governments. There is a fine balance between trying to make sure that we run an efficient data structure around the world as far as technology is concerned, and making sure that we allay the concerns of different governments around the world.
Right, even countries in the European Union, for instance, threatening legal action against Google for not complying with their directives. Now, all of this brings us to the larger debate of whether it's a debate between protectionism on one end, those who are arguing for freedom of speech on the internet also, and also the need for a larger ecosystem ecosystem where you can keep the interests of countries, of users, and of companies in mind?
Look, I think there's going to be there's going to be a balance that will have to be struck, because there are competing principles at stake here. There are principles of privacy. There are principles of freedom of speech, right to information. There is the whole user convenience argument. There's a whole series of things that need to come together, that need to make sure that we can find and strike the balance between things. I think these conversations are good conversations to have. These conversations are happening around the world. They're happening sometimes due to the right reasons, sometimes due to the wrong reasons. But I think this is an industry in evolution, and hopefully there are intelligent people who are involved in these conversations, and hopefully we'll get the right outcome.
But how do you deal with a situation when you yourself said you've been caught unawares, where there is a war happening between two countries or between several countries over issues like spying, where really it is you as the medium which has come under question?
Us as an industry includes you as well.
Right.
Perhaps you guys are also in the digital space as much as we are. So I think this is an industry-wide issue that has to be dealt with. The fact that we were all caught unawares is fair. I think now none of us is unaware. Now we're all aware. And the right conversations are happening all around the world to make sure what do we do with this problem that we are on. And as I said, intelligent people are involved in these conversations. Hopefully the right thing will happen.
But you're not going to help governments in their spying activities. Is that something that you can make an admission of as an internet giant? Because you're a global company at the end of the day.
I think we have been very clear in our point of view that we're not going to assist in any activities that we believe are not in the interest of our users.
Let's change track and talk a little more about how technology is continuing to shape our lives and will continue to shape our lives, given the fact that companies like Google are looking at a lot of innovative products, some pretty wild experiments coming out from the tech giant, including Google Glass that everyone's waiting for. When do we see that launch finally happening?
And I think you've seen us do lots of interesting things from an innovation perspective. We've had balloons up in the sky in a different continent. We've had Google Glass as an experiment around wearable computing. We're constantly trying to figure out how to disrupt paradigms, how to break sort of normal ways of doing things. And I see Google Glass has been a phenomenal experiment in terms of the way we are trying to look at how people would wear computing.
Right.
It has had some fascinating insights for us. We've had a few thousand people who've actually experienced it, bought it. I think we have a lot more work to do in terms of how that becomes more and more mainstream and continues to become more and more interesting. So as soon as we launch it, we'll be sure to tell everyone.
All right, and it is round the corner is what we can expect, because 2013 was tipped to be the launch for Google Glass, but it's obviously not happening this year.
Depends on how round the corner is.
All right. But Nikesh, explain to our viewers what Google Glass is all about. I know it's all wearable technology, but are you saying I'm going to have glasses which will simply be like a computer?
Well, it's kind of interesting. The glass comes with a camera on top of it. It's got a screen, so sometimes screens are useful which are right in front of your eyes, so your hands are free. You can do things with it. A camera that is mounted right above your eyes, so it actually can provide a different perspective to people in terms of what you're looking at and how you're looking at things. And part of our opportunity at Google, what we often try and do is we often try and create a platform, and then we see what people use that platform for. Like YouTube effectively is a platform where people like yourselves and other people upload content, people enjoy the content, and we end up having a platform. Google Search is effectively a platform where you can find things. Once you find them, you actually go experience that content on the site that it exists on. So our hope and our objective is to create phenomenal platforms that people can use as enabling technology around the world. And Google Glass can be another platform in terms of the way various people can find interesting things to do. We've had people experiment with this in the medical space, where doctors have used it to provide a perspective of what they're operating on. We have people in sports use it. I've had some golfers wear it, and you can see life from a very different perspective. Unfortunately, you can see all the mistakes they make. So there's lots of different ways people are going to apply it. I'm pretty sure that you or I could not sit here and imagine every scenario that's going to be used for.
But again, the flip side of any of those products, like with most of technology, is again the privacy issue. So that's the big worry that comes up yet again.
You're quite worried about this stuff, right?
Right, but it's not me. It's like the backlash you face, for instance, on Google Street View. Now, those are legitimate concerns again, and each time you develop a new product to address some of those concerns.
Look,
Nikesh,
as I said to you, we're going into a world of technology where technology is enabling our lives more and more. as that happens, as you roam freely in the digital world, you will leave footprints. The question is, what do we do with those footprints? If you can use them in the aggregate to provide a better experience to you in the future, or you can use it to provide me a better experience, that's all wonderful. At the end of the day, I used the credit card example.
Right.
The reason I used it is because it's an established model, has been around for many, many, many years, and we've learned to live with the system and trust the system, that the people who have access to the data are not going to abuse it or misuse it. And I think over time, yes, obviously there is some degree of concern what happens with all this data. As people get more comfortable with the idea of this data existing and it not being abused over time.
But it is being abused is the worry, Nikesh. You know, as long as it's not being abused, it's fine. But
that's an assertion on your part, which I think I've spent enough time trying to explain to you why
Sure, but I'm saying
that
revelations like the recent ones coming from the US administration, spying on world leaders around the world, now those are worrisome revelations that lead you to worry about the abuse of that and whether companies like Google can actually protect users beyond a point or not.
Sure, that there are always bad actors in life. Things can be used for positive events and sometimes for negative events. It's our collective job as society to make sure that the good outweighs the bad. I think part of my assertion that there are many smart people trying to resolve this and make sure the right things will happen is my faith in the system that good will happen. But you cannot hold an entire society at ransom in terms of progress and getting the right answer in terms of user convenience because you're worried about one particular thing. We have to collectively figure out what's the right way to make sure that thing does not worry us in the long term. I understand there are certain recent events that might worry people more than less, but I don't think that makes the entire system bad.
Perfect. Let me also now talk about some of your other wild ideas coming from Google, and when are we going to actually see them become revenue generators? Because the real concern is that while you're doing fantastically well, your profits continue to beat expectations, the share topped $1,000 a piece, and that was fantastic news. What next from Google? What's the next big revenue generator? And I'm sure that worries you as the Chief Business Officer as well. Innovation, yes, but when do we see that actually translating into revenues? Flying power plants, driverless cars, all fantastic ideas.
You know, the funny problem is that a few years ago when I'd sit and talk to people, they'd say, I'm really worried, is Google going to be able to do well from a revenue perspective? Now that doesn't seem to be a worry anymore. I'm really worried, the world is moving to mobile. What's going to happen to your desktop revenues? It seems to be okay. People said we're going into a world of video, more broadband. What's going to happen? You guys spend a lot of money on YouTube. That seems to be okay. People worried about Android. You guys aren't doing, what are you doing with an open app operating system? I think we're okay.
We're worried about Motorola as well.
Well, you know, I think you guys spend a lot of time worrying.
You seem very confident, a very confident Chief Business Officer. Is great to see from Google, but honestly, what next from Google?
Look, we have lots of exciting things going on. We're very excited about all the stuff we're doing, whether it's our desktop business, which still continues to do well, our YouTube acquisition, which now is a great business in its own right, all the work we're doing around Android. We think it's a great ecosystem, phenomenal amounts of applications and content being available in it, lots of OEMs around the world producing great phones with us. So we think all the things that are humming along are on the right track. We're trying lots of interesting things, as you yourself outlined. We will continue to try them. We don't spend time worrying about revenues on new stuff until we believe users like them, until we believe users have adopted them, until we believe you've actually done enough to create differentiation with them from a user point of view.
The concern really is that perhaps some of the simplistic ideas like Orkut is something that Google ignored while it continues to chase some of the bigger innovative ideas. So while you spend a lot on R&D, you actually let something like Orkut slip away, even though Facebook now continues to rule the social networking space in that sense. So is that a regret in any ways?
So let's go through this one more time. We started 15 years ago. We had a search business. We were not making money. We developed a revenue model. We started making money. We bought YouTube.
Right.
I was not making money. We spent a lot of money buying YouTube. We made it work. We bought DoubleClick. We're not doing display well. We made that work. The world went to mobile, thankfully to Android, thankfully to our monetization systems. We figured out a way to monetize Android. So I think we've done a lot of things right. Have we had some failed experiments? Yes. Have we probably missed a beat once in a while? We probably have. But there's no company out there that does everything right and gets it right and is first in everything. So I think we've done our fair share of right things, and we've had success in our fair share of things. And it's not an opportunity that we're ignoring. I think we've made tremendous strides after Orkut or Buzz or Wave. in Google+. We think we have hundreds of millions of users around the world who are in Google+, can continue to grow. And that is actually acting as a social spine for a variety of our products. And we just integrated Google Plus and YouTube, and our ability to make comments, which has made YouTube a phenomenal experience, because now actually you know who's commenting and you see the comments of your friends, as opposed to people trying to get there and say, I was first. So we are making progress. We are making things work collectively, and we hopefully will continue to innovate and continue to make that happen.
You talked about mobile particularly. As we wrap up, I'd like to get your views on whether desktops or computers are soon going to be passé. Is that the sense you're getting? And how you're also really ensuring that a lot of your revenues now start moving towards the mobile business. So our handhelds, smartphones, mobile is going to really rule the world.
Well, to be fair, I don't know what's going to happen. And on my very personal basis, yes, I open my laptop less and less because I travel around with a phone and a tablet, and I get most of my work done on those things. Not as prolific a typer on those things, but I still get my stuff done. I think there are two related answers there. One is, as you know from our monetization systems, we have been flipping our model to go from being a desktop model to being able to apply to every screen. Not only have we done it on our products and services on the user side, we've done the same thing on our monetization side. All of our ad systems are working across all the screens, so people have the opportunity to advertise with us across every screen, whatever the kind of advertising they're looking for. So I'm not worried about that one. The part which is fascinating is you see that we've been through a world where we had many screens we interact with in our lives. You do and I do. And it's fascinating. I think all your viewers should do this experiment and try and think how many screens do they interact with in their daily life. And you'll find it's a lot more than you actually think. The thing which is interesting is those screens still don't talk to each other. Yes. Some of them have begun to. I can take things from my phone or my tablet and get them on my TV with a little bit of magic. Hopefully a lot less magic will be required in the future.
And that's really the big challenge, to
get
those devices to talk to each other.
At some point in time, in a few years, our devices will talk to each other seamlessly. Screens will become just screens, and it'll be the user experience that we want. And you and I may sit and watch a video together, and I may show it to you on my phone and say, wait, there's the TV there, let's get it up there, because it's much more convenient for both of us to watch. And they will just seamlessly talk to each other. So in that case, I'm not sure which screen dies and which screen survives, but I think that it's more important that these screens begin to talk to each other. I think there'll be a point where screens that don't talk to each other or that are not connected to something are useless.
And I remember you telling us not so long ago that you're worried about that startup in the garage rather than some of your competitors. And I know you don't like talking about competition, so I wouldn't mention their names, but you're not worried about competitors, you're worried about that startup from the garage. Is that still what you believe?
I think one has to be, constantly paranoid about somebody who's out there trying to create a better user experience, because our biggest asset are our users and our people. And we've got to make sure we have great people to create great services for those users. And anytime either of those two is at risk, or there's some great people trying to create a great user experience, you have to be worried. Those people could be at a startup, those people could be at in your words, a competitor, but they're out there. And the only way for us to contend with that is to keep striving to create great user experiences with great people we have. That way we don't have to be looking at anybody else, we just have to be focusing on the user.
All right, and Google continues to have the soul and passion of a startup.
For the most part, I hope so, yes.
Right. Thanks very much, Nikesh. Here's wishing you and Google all the very best.
Thank you, Shraddha.